Thank you all for your patience and for joining us today. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Senator Chris Kehoe. She is co-author of our bill, principal co-author, along with Assemblyman Tom Amiano, who's caught on the Assembly floor right now, and I am Senator Mark Leno. I'll be introducing our guests in just a moment. You may remember when we introduced our Religious Freedom and Civil Marriage Protection Act in 2007, that the religious freedom section of it said that no minister, rabbi, priest, or any religious organization which does not wish to solemnize these same-sex marriages would be required to do so. So it really restated the First Amendment right to freedom of religion into state statute. We did get the bill to the governor's desk. Unfortunately, of course, he vetoed it. So that is not in state law right now. So what this bill does is takes that religious freedom with regard to civil marriage and puts it into state statute independent of the civil marriage protection, which, of course, as a result of Prop 8, we cannot do right now. So the bill very specifically will state in statute that no religious leader, no clergy person will be forced to solemnize any marriage of any sort that he or she cannot solemnize due to his or her faith tenets. So this could be with regard to an interfaith marriage, this could be with regard to an interracial marriage, and of course with regard to same-sex marriages. Now, we don't have same-sex marriages allowed here in California. So the question is, why are you doing this bill? And isn't this already in the First Amendment? Well, you may remember very clearly that during the Prop 8 campaign, proponents of Prop 8 repeatedly and often made the statement that if Prop 8 were to pass, they would be forced, clergy would be forced to perform marriages that they could not perform because of their faith position. So we never believed that to be the case because of the First Amendment right of freedom of religion, but we want to put an end to any concern whatsoever. We go a step further in this bill, and there are religious freedom protections in other states which have the allowance for marriage equality, but we're the only state with this bill as law that will state in statute that no religious institution will be at risk of losing its tax-exempt status by denying to perform a marriage which they cannot perform. So this is, we're entitling it the Civil Marriage Freedom, Religious Freedom Act. And we think this is very important. You know, a good analogy here, and the bill also, let me state, makes a clear distinction between civil marriage and religious marriage. Our Section 300 of the Family Code has always stated that marriage was a civil contract arising from a relationship. So it has always been a civil contract. But through these campaigns for and against marriage equality, there's been a real confusion. What's civil marriage, what's religious marriage? So we have amended in the word civil to modify the word marriage wherever it is to be found in the family code. So that's one other thing that the bill does. So the analogy I was going to make mention is that we have civil divorce in our society. Now, the Catholic Church has a First Amendment right not to recognize civil divorce. And they don't. That is their right to do so. We want to make it equally clear that we're talking in any case, whatever the marriage may be in California, it's a civil marriage. And if couples wish to have a religious marriage, that's up to them. It has no interest of the state. So we have a number of speakers here today. I want to also thank the President Pro Tem, Darrell Steinberg, for joining us as a co-author. Unfortunately, he's busy with just a few other things this morning, but Senator Christine Kehoe is here, and I welcome her.
Thank you.
And Assemblyman Amiano has joined us, too, so he'll speak next. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Leno. I want to thank Senator Leno for his leadership on this issue and also for the support of the California Council of Churches. That's a very important part of this discussion today. And I am very proud to co-author this thoughtful and fair bill that Senator Leno has authored. For too long, opponents of marriage equality have said that priests, pastors, and rabbis would have to preside over weddings between lesbian and gay couples. This claim is false, yet they have used the argument to spread fear and doubt about the issue. Under Senator Leno's bill, he makes clear, and we will finally put this tired claim to rest. At no time is a church, a synagogue, or a mosque required to host, celebrate, recognize a marriage, or solemnize a marriage of any couple. That will remain the same under Senator Leno's bill. I really want to thank Mark for taking this approach in this piece of legislation to clear up a confusion that has cast doubt on the entire issue of marriage equality. I want to extend my gratitude to the many congregations in California that have looked at this issue and that have welcomed the LGBT community over the years. I really believe, and I know from my experience in San Diego, to those congregations, it is through your love and compassion that equality will one day prevail. This is an important piece of legislation. As I said, I'm very honored to be co-authoring with Senator Leno and Assemblymember Amiano, and I'm glad we're here today to hear about the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So as I introduced Assemblyman Tom Amiano, who is also a principal co-author of the bill, I do want to recognize our bill sponsors, and that would be the California Council of Churches Impact, and the Reverend Rick Schlosser will be speaking in a moment. And we also have a representative from Equality California I'll introduce momentarily. Assemblyman.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Senator, and honored guest. I'm delighted about this legislation. Applaud Senator Leno because this legislation really clarifies and defines the truth. We don't hear much truth when we're hearing arguments against gay marriage and same-sex marriage. What we hear is distortion, alarmist, fear-mongering, all the kinds of tactics that people have used historically to oppress and demonize another group. In some ways, it's unfortunate that we even have to be here today, but it is necessary. People are playing hardball. We're not just going to roll over when the lives of LGBT people are distorted and made worthless. So again, when you are in a heated battle such as we are in for human rights, legislation like this not only becomes necessary, but is definitely a courageous step to take, and I really do applaud Senator Leno, and am happy to be a principal co-sponsor. Thank you.
You want to go back to the floor? Okay. So our two sponsors, again, are the California Council of Churches Impact and Equality California. First, we'll hear from Dr. Reverend Rick Schlosser, followed by Mario Guerrero from Equality California.
Thank you, Senator, very much. I'm the Reverend Dr. Rick Schlosser, Executive Director of California Council of Churches Impact. We represent 52 California regional judicatories and 21 different denominations in the mainline Protestant and Orthodox traditions. And our member denominations represent over 6,000 congregations and more than 6,500 people of faith throughout the state. And California Council of Churches Impact has long been in the forefront of the movement toward full equality for all, including marriage equality. However, we represent faith traditions and congregations which are divided on the issue of marriage equality between those who support marriage equality and those who oppose it. We support the freedom of clergy and congregations who believe civil marriage should be available to all committed couples to be able to celebrate marriage for same-sex couples. But we also support the religious freedom of those whose consciences or traditions oppose marriage equality to refuse to solemnize marriages which go against their belief. And that is why we fully support Senator Leno's bill to codify religious freedom and to remove any ambiguity or fear about the consequences to those who follow their consciences on either side of the marriage equality issue. Religious freedom is a fundamental American value. Both the California and federal constitutions protect it. However, if these protections are enshrined in California statutes, we'll have even more confidence that churches will never face any consequences for solemnizing or not solemnizing marriages that are contrary to their beliefs. For example, churches will not face fines or other penalties for refusing to perform marriages for same-sex couples. Now, we are eager to see all Californians have the same rights. Allowing loving same-sex couples to marry provides critical legal protections to their children, protects families, strengthens communities. And when we extend the same freedoms to all people, we become a more fair and just society. The role of government is to protect our freedom to worship as we choose. Just as the government should not discriminate in issuing marriage licenses, it also should not require clergy to perform religious ceremonies that run counter to their beliefs. It is the job of government to protect all citizens equally by ensuring equal access to civil marriage and by protecting the freedom of religion that is enshrined in our Constitution. Doing so keeps our society fair and equal, delivering on the promise of our founders while honoring the many belief systems that the Constitution they established worked so hard to protect. Freedom is a good thing. We all deserve more of it. And we call on our legislators and the governor in California to pass this bill and sign it into law. We must protect all of our freedoms. They are too precious to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Newly hired to the staff of Equality California, we welcome Mario Guerrero.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. My name is Mario Guerrero, and I'm Government Affairs Director with Equality California, and we are a sponsor of the Civil Marriage Religious Freedom Act. I first would like to thank, of course, the author of the bill, Senator Leno, for his leadership, in addition to the co-authors, Senator Pro Tem Steinberg, Senator Kehoe, Assemblyman Amiano, and Assemblyman Jones. Equality California has a history of sponsoring measures that strengthen equal protections for all. As such, we are a proud sponsor of this bill, Civil Marriage Religious Freedom Act, which will strengthen vital religious freedoms. Why are we sponsoring this legislation? Because there is ambiguity in our communities with respect to marriage for same-sex couples and the freedom of religion. During the efforts to secure marriage equality and throughout the current Proposition 8 court challenge, we have heard how opponents of marriage equality have used fear and lies, such as the idea that clergy would be forced to marry same-sex couples to take away the basic right of marriage from the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. This bill will make it crystal clear that clergy have the right to perform only those civil marriages that conform to their religious beliefs. We hope to have support not only from our Democratic leaders and friends, but also from our Republican leaders and friends. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue that we all should support. It's supporting religious freedom and the fundamental principle that everyone should support. In closing, I would like to say that when we win marriage for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, and we will win this basic right for the community, we want to ensure that our First Amendment right of freedom of religion is also protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, for pointing out that this is indeed not a partisan issue, so I will be asking all of my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, to co-author the bill with me. And yes, I will be calling the Archbishop of San Francisco to see if the Catholic Church will also join us as a co-sponsor. So our last two speakers, we have from the Imani United Church of Christ, Reverend Janice Steele, followed by Rabbi David Wexler Hazen, who will speak from the Jewish community. Reverend.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate being invited to come and speak, certainly not on behalf of all African Americans. I do want to state that right up front. But as an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, I certainly support equality across the board. I've lived it. I'm a part of the same gender-loving community, and at Imani Community United Church of Christ, we understand very clearly that marriage is a civil issue. But what I want to do is to take a moment to invite those who are having some theological issues around their own faith traditions and faith practices to enter into dialogue with the California Council of Churches, with Imani Community United Churches of Christ, and with faith leaders across this great city of ours and in the state of California to really have a very honest and open dialogue about the implications and what the fallout will be if we do not come to some type of understanding that, one, we respect each other's rights to either provide and officiate at services for either same-gender loving couples or other, or to basically ignore it. And that is the piece that I'm very concerned about, is the possibility of clergy and churches and mosques and temples basically doing a don't ask, don't tell version of this whole law that is being suggested today by that we're talking about in terms of it being a civil matter. Because what it does, it gives us an easy out to basically say, I don't have to do it, you can't force me to do it, and so I'm not going to do it. What does it do in our communities, though, for clergy and for congregations to take an easy out as opposed to actually looking at the issue in a very sincere way to talk about the implications that it will have on our congregants? So again, I am not speaking for the African American community, but I am saying that I support civil marriage among any and all couples, but as ordained clergy, I have a responsibility to discern whether or not it is something that lines up with my own faith beliefs, but also am I doing a service or a disservice to my congregation? Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Reverend. Our last speaker is Rabbi David, and then we'll take some questions.
This country is a great country. I love this country. I am so proud to be an American, and I represent myself in saying that I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And the reason that this country is so great, the reason that we are leaders in innovation and creativity, is because we take a huge risk. We take the huge risk of freedom. And we should all understand that. It is really, really risky to let people think for themselves. It is really, really risky to let them express themselves. And it is really risky to let them worship as they see fit. And yet that is the bedrock of American values. And so to push particular theological interpretations of marriage and of what clergy would be compelled to do in order to deny some the freedom to sanctify their relationships is not in keeping with American values. I believe that those of us who believe in less government, or rather, who believe that government's job is to empower communities to solve their own problems and to maximize the commitments that people make to a good life, should support the fact that commitment and sanctity for relationships is a value that we would all hold dear, and that no clergy would be ever forced to solemnize a marriage that they couldn't do, and there are plenty of other options for folks who are looking for someone to solemnize their marriage. So no one will be ever compelled to do something that is against their theological beliefs, but those theological beliefs should not be used to determine a civil matter such as what constitutes a marriage. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Happy to take any questions anyone has. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about the timing, why you're doing this now? Is it in expectation that in the very near future you believe the courts or perhaps the voters will legalize same-sex marriage?
It's a perfectly reasonable question. Clearly, with the trial concluding in San Francisco in the federal court, with signatures being gathered currently to overturn Prop 8 at a 2010 ballot. If that doesn't happen, it could be 2012, 2014. We know that public opinion is shifting. We know as the demographic shift occurs, in fact, much of this debate just goes up in smoke. So I do believe that marriage equality is California's future, as it is already in 5 other states. So the timing, I think, is important, that, again, we clarify and put to rest any concerns that any clergy or religious institution would rightfully have as to what would happen to their rights, their First Amendment guaranteed rights to freedom of religion, when there is marriage equality in California. So this bill will finally put that to rest.
Do you think it will make it hard to get it passed, that opponents of your legislation may say, well, why do we need this now? We don't have same-sex marriage now. I mean, do you think that would be a deterrent, I guess, is the question?
I think that to hear someone express that argument would be plain politics with good policy.
Thank you.
So the protection already exists, correct, with the First Amendment of the Constitution?
That is a presumption that you clearly have and that I clearly have, but if you look at so many of the press conferences and news clips from the proponents of Prop 8 in 2008, you quickly realize there are those who interpret the First Amendment right, freedom of religion in the First Amendment quite differently. So there is, unless it's in statute, there is some ambiguity, and it could actually lead to a courtroom decision as to whether the intent of the First Amendment's freedom of religion in fact does protect a clergy from not having to solemnize a marriage that he or she does not believe in, or for that matter, a religious institution's tax exemption status. We want to remove any question, any ambiguity, put it in a statute. As I said, it is really broader. The issue of the day is marriage equality for same-sex couples, but the effect of this statute will be broader in that it affects a clergy who doesn't want to perform an interfaith marriage or an interracial marriage. I, in fact, know a rabbi who says he will perform same-sex marriages if both members of the couple are Jewish, but he won't perform a heterosexual marriage if it's interfaith. So you've got all sorts of convolutions of this, and as Reverend Schlosser pointed out, this just makes it fair for everybody.
But even with those opinions, those clergy would be protected under our already existing Constitution of the United States.
We think so, but they expressed that they weren't so certain.
So California would be the first state in the country to pass a law that supports the United States Constitution.
No, we won't. In fact, in each of the states that now has the allowance for marriage equality, there is attention to this issue. So those states already have something in statute. And so often we put the details of a broad understanding of a constitutional protection into state law. Sometimes it's as a result of a court decision or case law, because the themes of the Constitution are broad. The details of statute are specific. So it's not uncommon, and there's nothing precedent-setting about this.
So is the idea here, if we knock down enough of the obstacles to same-sex marriage in the state, people will run out of reasons to oppose it?
Well, I'm going to refer back to Reverend Schlosser's comments. In his California Council of Churches umbrella of more than a dozen different Christian denominations, some of those members support marriage equality for same-sex couples, some do not. But he was sharing with me a conversation he was having with a Lutheran minister who, when he understood, because he had doubt himself that the First Amendment protected him from having to perform a marriage he didn't believe in, or his church's tax status, that when he learned that there was nothing to be concerned about, then he didn't seem to have a reason to oppose this if it wasn't going to impose something on him.
Senator, do you believe this would help efforts to get a ballot measure passed? That if this passes, then it is, like you said, it's one, it's an argument that they made in supporting Prop 8. Do you think it would help efforts to get same-sex marriage passed on the ballot if your law passes?
That's conjecture. There may be polling that you could try and find that could determine that to be the case. But again, I think this just resolves any question as to what the First Amendment's freedom of religion actually means on the ground for a clergy person when the issue of marriage equality for same-sex couples is discussed. And as I say, it goes further than that in protecting their tax-exempt status. That was something I heard often in proponent arguments for Prop 8.
The protection of tax-exempt status with this bill, is that something that can eventually be used in an argument to allow churches to contribute to political campaigns or to actually campaign for specific political parties, which they're not really allowed to do right now?
That's a whole nother issue altogether, and I think that's federally regulated, not at the state level, that those who have certain tax-exempt status cannot participate using their federal tax benefits to participate in political activity, because that would be using public dollars for political work. Any other questions?
What committee do you expect the bill to go to first?
Judicial? That's for the Rules Committee to decide, but a good guess would be Senate Judiciary.
Has Assemblymember Perez, is he going to be a co-signer?
We're hoping he will.
Co-author, I mean?
Got his hand full right now. In fact, I think one of them has a gavel as we speak.
Has anybody expressed any dissent to you about the bill so far? Any assembly members or senators?
I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of members. I would imagine in the coming weeks, those discussions will be had.
I know that this is probably projecting into the future, but do you think that this is a bill that the governor would sign?
I make a habit of not speaking for the governor.
All right.
What do you think your chances are with the Archbishop of San Francisco?
I look forward to the conversation. I really can't imagine why anyone, including the Archbishop, would oppose seeing straps and belts around religious freedom.
Can I just
Oh, please, Reverend.
chime in here?
I don't speak for the Archbishop either.
I've had conversations with bishops from lots of different denominations, some who support marriage equality, some who oppose marriage equality. Almost unanimously, the response is, this is a no-brainer. Who could not be for supporting religious freedom? So I think that in the religious community, the support is going to be almost unanimous for this.
I guess Rick does speak for the Archbishop. I'm going to bring him to our meeting. No other questions. Thank you all very much for joining us, and I thank our guests.